While the media tries to convince you that Donald Trump is Hitler, they are ignoring Kamala's husband. I guess I was always under the impression that Doug Emhoff, our second gentleman, was the new face of masculinity. Take a look.
Has being second gentleman changed your own view of perceived gender roles or what it means to be a man?
This is something I've thought about a lot and something I've spoken about a lot. There's too much of toxicity. It's masculine toxicity out there, and we've kind of confused what it means to be a man.
All right, so that's interesting. Does getting your daughter's nanny pregnant make you a man, Doug? Does allegedly slapping your girlfriend in the face in public make you a man, Doug? Because the media continues to portray the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, as exactly that, a gentleman. But he doesn't sound like a gentleman to me. In fact, the allegations surrounding that man right there, Doug Emhoff, Kamala's husband, are downright ugly, painting a picture of Doug that doesn't really line up with the line that Americans have been fed about the second gentleman for the last 3 months. In August, Josh Boswell reported in the Daily Mail that Doug Emhoff had an affair with his nanny when he was married to his first wife, Kirsten. They had 2 kids together, Ella and Cole, and Doug reportedly had an affair with Ella's nanny, a blonde woman named Najee Naylor, when Ella was in 3rd grade. And Doug, ever the family man, apparently got the nanny pregnant and then paid her $80,000 and had her sign an NDA. This all according to his report. Parents at Ella's school knew about the affair, and they were disgusted not by the affair, but by Doug Emhoff. As you can imagine, word traveled pretty around Ella's elite private school campus. And Doug doesn't deny any of this. Here's what he said, quote, "During my first marriage, Kirsten and I went through some tough times on account of my actions. Yeah, I took responsibility. We worked through things as a family and have come out stronger on the other side." But that's not the whole story, is it, Doug? Now, it's important to note, now this part of the story remains an allegation at this point. My team has reached out to the Kamala campaign and Doug Emhoff multiple times for comment, and they haven't said a word, which is very odd. I can tell you that being on this side of the camera in this industry, typically they will say something back to you. We haven't heard anything. But if you dare mention this story on CNN, they will shut you down, mister. This topic, this story, strictly off limits for all legacy media outlets and local newsrooms nationwide, where this story has yet to be covered at all.
I think this Eminem thing, I got to tell you, this campaign is... So everything that's said about Donald Trump and his treatment of women and the gender gap in this campaign, this rapper, who I fully admit sold a lot of records, if you've read some of the things he has said about the promotion of domestic violence, when you think about the things he has said in order to sell those records, and you also consider some of the questions that are swirling around Harris's own husband in this regard.
Oh my God. Okay, you don't even get 12 seconds.
I'm
not going to let you go into the far end of BS.
I'm just telling you.
Scott,
like, you can't go. Listen, I can't represent you in the defamation case.
We're gonna stop here.
You remember the Hunter Biden laptop story 4 years ago? Couldn't talk about that before the election, right? Leslie Stahl, Donald Trump, but now, 8 days from the election, it's getting harder and harder for Kamala and, quite frankly, Doug Emhoff himself not to comment on the allegations. And Josh Boswell, the same reporter who broke that story back in early August, is now reporting that he spoke exclusively with the woman who Doug allegedly slapped, his ex-girlfriend, seen in this photo obtained by the Daily Mail. They are keeping her name private, so we're going to call her Jane. Jane claims that Doug slapped her in the face so hard that she spun around while the two were leaving a gala event together in the south of France in 2012. And there is photographic evidence that Doug was at this event. Look there's Doug Emhoff at the event, 2012. Jane spoke exclusively with the Daily Mail and went on to say, quote, "Every time I see Doug on TV portraying a persona of a perfect spouse, I wonder if Najee, the woman I mentioned earlier, is watching too and feeling as disgusted as I am. I put my hand on the valet's shoulder to tell him, with my $100 bill, could you please get me a car as soon as possible? And as I'm talking to him, Doug got out of line, comes up, turns me around by my right shoulder. I'm completely caught off guard. I'm not bracing. I'm in 4-inch heels wearing a full-length gown, and he slaps me so hard, I spin around, and I'm in utter shock. There had been no fight, no argument, and I'm so furious, the only thing I could think to do was slap him back. And not a single reporter has asked Doug directly about those allegations, end quote. Those are the allegations right there about Doug Emhoff, our second gentleman, who wants to become the first gentleman. He doesn't sound like a very good person to me. He doesn't sound like a very good father. An unnamed Emhoff rep told Semaphore, small online outlet, the report is untrue. Any suggestion that he would or has ever hit a woman is false. That's it. That's all we've heard from Doug. Now, Doug, look, he's certainly entitled to due process, but the allegations are really bad. And one reporter has done the work breaking this story that no one wants to talk about out in the open. And that reporter is joining me now. Daily Mail reporter Josh Boswell, great to have you on. Excellent reporting. I guess the first question, and you've been at this a long time, do you find Jane to be credible? Do you believe her story personally?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do find her to be credible. And I would not have put this story out there if I didn't. Some of the things that lent her story credibility are, firstly, multiple friends of hers, witnesses, contemporaneously being told that same story. So, for example, she gets hit, she says, by Doug. She gets into the cab and she immediately calls a friend. And I spoke to that friend and he remembered it. He's a very successful businessman in New York. And he told me, yeah, I remember her calling me up. I was just going to bed in New York. She was in the south of France, and she called me up and she told me this story. She also told another friend contemporaneously and a third friend a few years later in 2018, when she saw Kamala Harris going after Brett Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court hearing, confirmation hearings.
Right.
The other thing that lends credence to her story is the documents that she and friends provided. There are photographs, you saw that one there. We have others in the story that we published on dailymail.com. And there are emails where she's talking with someone who she went to this gala with in 2012, who was there, and she talks about the hotel that she and Doug are staying at. There's the flight itinerary where it's got Doug and her names on it, and the dates match up. There is metadata on the photos that shows she was where she said she was at the time.
Right. Let me
There's
ask
a whole
you,
lot here that all adds up.
Yeah, and to your point, we've got airline receipt stuff that you just can't make up. Why won't Jane come forward and tell this story directly to somebody like myself on camera?
It's a good question, and I think you just have to put yourself in her position, right? These are very powerful people that you're talking about here, and she's a successful attorney in New York, and her life could be turned completely upside down if she came forward in person, named doing this. So she's trying to strike this delicate balance here of making sure that the public know, her side of the story here and what she perceives as an extreme hypocrisy by the Harris campaign presenting Doug as a feminist when, she says he was violent to a woman. But also not wanting to expose herself so much that she could be a focus of retaliation. That is what she's afraid of.
No, and I understand that. I guess, you're aware that here we are 8 days from the election here. The implications of this story are huge, particularly if Kamala wins. If Kamala wins, I wonder if the media here will get curious again. So far, they haven't. There's been a blackout on this story. I'm curious what you make of that. And I'm also wondering if you've had any threats or any concern for your safety in pursuing this story.
I'm glad to say I haven't. And, I think that that kind of conspiratorialness can get a little overblown. I don't think that Doug and Kamala are coming out for me. I don't think there's a hitman waiting outside my office here, right? But I do think that the media has not covered this properly. I think that there has been just a lack of courage or a lack of interest in a story that they should be very, very interested in, right? Think about the Me Too movement. Since 2018, we've had powerful, rich men called out for their bad behavior against women. This falls very squarely into that category. And yet we have not had any kind of similar response. And you've got to ask the question, well, is this because he's the husband of the woman running for president for the Democratic Party? I thought it was interesting that you brought up Hunter Biden, because that's something that I've reported on a lot. I was the first reporter to get the Hunter Biden laptop authenticated by cyber forensics experts. The New York Post broke the story, but we at Daily Mail got it authenticated first. And, it took the media months, years even, looking at the New York Times, Washington Post, to follow up and admit quietly, that stuff was actually real, that Hunter's laptop was real. And, maybe we'll get the same situation here where months later they'll finally, pursue it and say, oh, well, actually, we also found this same evidence that the Daily Mail has found. I'm hoping that people will follow it up because I think this is something that needs investigating.
No, I think, and people that push back say, well, listen, Doug's not top of the ticket. Look, this just speaks to Kamala's character. And it speaks to Doug, who has been, I'll play you a soundbite right now. This is Jen Psaki, former White House press secretary, interviewing Doug Emhoff. Again, no questions about this, but she goes as far to tell him that he's reshaping the perception of masculinity here in America. Let's listen.
There's also been an important part, or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny, I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the right thing to do, support women.
Isn't that unbelievable? This guy got his nanny pregnant and allegedly, according to your reporting, smacked his girlfriend in public outside an event in France in 2012. I'm just back to the getting the nanny pregnant. This led to the divorce with Kirsten, and I understand that they now co-parent and they have a decent relationship. Whatever happened to the baby? Could that baby be alive?
As far as I understand, from the sources that I spoke to, the investigation I've done, no, I don't believe so. I think that there was a miscarriage. And actually, one of the very interesting things that Jane told me was that when she was with Doug in LA visiting him in April 2012, she asked him, look, it feels like you're on the back foot here with your ex-wife. You're giving her a lot of ground in your divorce. Why is that? And Doug confessed to her, she said, about having this affair with, he described it as his daughter's teacher at the time, grade school teacher, because she was the teacher and moonlighting as the nanny. And he said also, not just that he'd had this affair, but the nanny had accused him of causing her to have the miscarriage somehow. And he didn't talk about physical abuse, but he did tell Jane, according to her, that he had yelled at the nanny and he'd been very angry at her.
Hold on,
now,
Josh, let me just back you up. I just want to make sure I'm following you here. So again, this is an allegation, but somehow Doug caused this miscarriage, but you're saying not physically. He didn't hit her or something like that. Am I accurate there?
Yes, this is Doug saying to Jane in the car, the nanny accused me of this. Okay. And he was presenting it as some kind of false claim that the nanny was making up. But I thought when I heard this from Jane, okay, I need to look into this. So what did I do? I looked at police call-out records for where the nanny was staying when she was allegedly pregnant. And what do you know? There's an LAPD call-out. It's a life-threatening emergency, sirens on. They didn't say in the records that they gave me who was involved in that incident. So it doesn't say the nanny. There's no mention of Doug in the records I have. And they won't give me the full police report to really find out whether he is involved in that. But that's what I have. And I put that in my original piece. I think that needs further investigation.
Yeah. Do you have any plans to continue with this story, or is this story done for now?
Oh, I'm absolutely continuing to investigate. And I do hope that the rest of the media do as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. I don't want another Hunter Biden laptop situation. I don't want to, there's polling now that almost 80% of Americans, when asked, say that yes, the Hunter Biden laptop would have impacted the way they voted had they known about it before the 2020 election. And I just don't want that to happen again in 2024. Again, Hunter wasn't top of the ticket, but he certainly could have played a huge role. Doug's not top of the ticket, but he's married to the woman who could win the presidency in 8 short days. Josh, thank you so much for making the time for us. We appreciate it. Hope you'll come back and see us. Josh Boswell, Daily Mail.
Thank you.